So for this lecture, we're going to talk about listening. So when we talk about communication, probably by default, we would refer to the way we talk, the way we express our ideas. But listening is also very important in interpersonal communication. We can get a lot of information through listening, and it's equally important with what we see and what we read. Let me show you some data to show the importance of listening. So let's look at this column first. So we spend 9% of our communication time on writing and 16% of the time on reading. And for 30% of the communication time, we are talking with someone, whereas listening takes up to 45% of our communication time. And let's check out at what age we begin to develop each of these communication skills. So we begin to learn reading around 6 to 8 years old. And we began to learn to write when we were in elementary school, around 10 years old. Speaking, we began to, learn how to speak when we were 1 to 2 years old. But listening, this is a skill we began to develop once when we were born. That is the first skill we get. And for the other three skills, writing, reading, and speaking, we actually get trained, developed these three types of skills based on listening, through listening. So we can say that the listening is really important. That's the first skill we learn. But let me show you another set of data. So this is some kind of TED Talks I noticed when I was doing the teaching preparation for this topic. This is a TED Talk on YouTube by this scholar, Julian Aoyong Treasure. In this TED Talk, he discussed 5 ways to listen better. And at the same time, I also found another TED Talk by this same guy, Julian Treasure. But this time, in this TED Talk, he took a different perspective, how to speak so that people want to listen. So it seems that these two TED Talks looking at this interpersonal communication, but from different perspectives. This one is teaching people how to listen better, how to be a good listener, whereas this one is teaching people how to talk so that other people, they can listen. So let's check out their view times. So this one, teaching people how to be a good listener, got like 700,000 times of viewing. Whereas this one, teaching people how to talk, how to speak, so that others can listen, got like 3 times compared with this one, teaching people how to be a listener. So it's really kind of ironic. Everybody wants to get heard, but nobody wants to be listening. So today we're going to talk about this listening component, very important element in interpersonal communication. So pretty much like the perceptions, listening is a multiple step process. Specifically, it involves 5 steps. We're gonna break down these 5 steps and look at them one by one. But first, listening is not a simple thing. It first starts with something called receiving. So here is a question for you guys to consider. Is there any difference between hearing and listening? So I'll pause here and give you guys a few seconds to think about this question. Definitely not. They're not the same thing, right? So hearing is a physical process. It just refers to the natural and passive behavior where receiving any signals or any sound. This is a pure physical process where the sound coming into our ears, a complete biological and physical process. Whereas for listening, you got to put some mental effort into it. You got to cognitively process this information coming to your ears and make meaning of this sound, of the signals. So unlike the hearing, listening is actually a skill. You got to play an active role to interpret the meaning of the messages. So hearing actually is the first step of listening. That is, you receive the signal, you receive the sound. And after we receive the signal, we move to the second phase of listening, which is attending. That is, we paying attention to the information you receive, or paying part of our attention to the information we've received. So pretty much like the perceptions, we cannot pay attention to every single piece of information we hear. We would selectively pay attention to part of this information. And here I want to talk about a term or concept called limited capacity for processing information to show that we don't have the ability or we don't have the cognitive capacity to pay attention and process every single piece of information coming to our ears. So regarding this limited capacity to process information, I'm going to describe an experiment to prove this situation for you guys. So a few decades ago, this is a really classic psychological experiment. The researchers, they wanted to see whether human beings will have unlimited capacity to process information. So what they did is they invited the participants coming to their lab, and these are the instructions. So first, the participants were asked to wear a headphone on their ears, and they're gonna hear a sound beep from time to time from the headphones. And then their task was to push a button in front of them immediately after hearing the beep sound. So the researchers were interested in measuring how fast they could react to this beep sound. So for this first round, the participants did a very good job immediately pushing this button after hearing the beep sound. For the second round, the participants were asked to read a newspaper while at the same time push this button after hearing the sound beep. For this second time, the participants, their reaction time apparently slowed down. And for the third round, the participants were asked to read newspaper and listening to the music from the beep. At the same time, they were asked to push the button after hearing the really loud beep sound from the headphone. At this time, their reaction time was dramatically slowed down. So this experiment showed us that we don't have infinite capacity for processing the information. Our cognitive capacity is quite limited. We cannot really concentrate on everything. So next time when you do your homework while listening to the music, or when you are multitasking, such as being in a conversation while checking your cell phone, think about this experiment. Think about this truth that you have limited capacity for information processing. You are actually being distracted. So that is the second step of listening. Let's get back to these 5 steps of listening. So after we pay attention to some information, and we have to move to the third step, which is try to draw meanings, try to make sense of this information, that is understanding. So pretty much like the perceptions, we still have 2 ways for us to interpret the meaning from the signals or from the sound we receive. The first one is by using our knowledge. The second one is by making inferences. Let me give you a concrete example. So let's say right now it's midnight. You are lying on your bed, trying to get into sleep. Suddenly you hear a sound, and it's like this. So of course it got your attention, and you may think that someone is knocking on the door. Probably someone needs a favor or it's an emergency situation. So because you have these relevant or similar experiences before, you have the knowledge, your knowledge will help you to figure out the meaning of this sound. Someone is outside your door trying to get you. So this is the first way for us to draw meaning or make sense of the information we receive. But what if the sound is like this? Well, sounds really scary, right? Probably for your whole life, you have never encountered such a situation. And then your knowledge is not adequate to make sense, to draw meaning from this sound. And then you may want to you have to make some guess. What's going on here? Is it a ghost or is it your friends playing tricks on you? So at this time, you have no or zero relevant knowledge to help you figure out what's going on here. What you can do is guessing and making inferences. That is the second way for us to make sense of the sound. And let's move on to the fourth step, that is responding. So responding is you want to convey that you are involved, you are paying attention, and you understand what the other person is talking about. So for this responding, I'm going to talk about two ways for us to show our attention, to show our engagement. The first one is back channel cues, the second one is paraphrasing. So both of these are some responses we could provide to the other person to show we are paying attention, we are involved in this conversation. But difference is these two types of responses that are provided at the same at different time points. So these back channel cues are provided while the other person is still talking. Okay, such as we would nod our head and provide some vocals such as got you. Okay, so these are the responses I provide while the other person is still talking to show that to show my attention, to show my involvement. And paraphrasing is another response we provide to show our attention, but this is something we provide after the other person is done with his or her speaking terms. So when you do this paraphrasing, you are actually summarizing the other person's comments after they finished talking. So what if we have a class face-to-face in the classroom, usually if I get a question from my students, the first thing I want to do is to paraphrase the student's question. So I do this for two purposes. The first one is I'm paraphrasing to show that I'm paying attention. And second, I want to double check with this student to make sure that I understand this question correctly. Okay, so that is the fourth step of listening. Let's move on to the last one, which is recall. Recall is pretty straightforward. We memorize or we remember this information for later use. And here I want to talk about a a strategy or a device we use to help us better memorize the information. It's called mnemonics. So by definition, this is a device such as patterns of letters or ideas or associations which can assist us in memorizing the information. Let me give you a concrete example to show you what this mnemonics is. Let's say if I want you guys to remember the 5 Great Lakes in the United States in the order from west to the east. And these are the 5 Great Lakes. From west to east, Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, Lake Erie, and Lake Ontario.